Good morning, everyone in the West, and good afternoon to those of you who are at points further east. I'm joining you from Vancouver this morning, and welcome to our number 62 in our COVID-19 update webinar series. For those of you who have been with us since near the beginning, you know what this is all about. For those of you who are just joining us, since the beginning of the pandemic, we've been putting on webinars where we really try and keep you up to date and answer as many questions as we can on the latest with respect to COVID restrictions and COVID supports and what you need to know that is affecting your business. And so here we are 2 years, almost 2 years later, and number 62. So welcome. We've got a lot to update you on. Last week we had CRA. And for those of you who joined us for that webinar, there was a lot of you. I think we had over 1,400 on last week's webinar. This one will be a bit different. This is our normal, just our normal crew. You'll find us a little, maybe a touch less buttoned up than some of the CRA folks. They're pretty careful, as you can see, about what they want to say. And of course, they were more focused, and they're not willing to discuss any of the programs that haven't yet been legislated. So we're going to give you a bit of a broader overview today on what we know. As always, you know, there's still uncertainty. These programs are evolving, and there's latest information is always coming in. So we'll be very clear on when we are, what we know, and how certain we are with that knowledge. And as we start, let me introduce my team, the team we're working with today. Of course, Corinne, my co-host right from the beginning, and is here in the house. And we always have a lot of fun in these webinars. So hi, Corinne. And Jocelyn is with us today. And some of you have met Jocelyn before. She's our senior manager of business resources. So she's the one that helps answer all the questions. So she takes lots of calls. I think we just did the final tally. We did 78,000 calls with our members last year, so we're really proud of that. And of course, some of those come in the form of email, and some of them come in the form of phone calls. So hello, Jocelyn. And maybe I will just say there's a Q&A and a chat function here, and we're going to use the Q&A as what we're going to be following Jocelyn, and she's got several colleagues in the background will be helping answer some questions. We like to answer as many as we can during the webinar. So if you have a question, put it in the Q&A. That's what Corinne and I will also be looking at. But in the chat function, you can use that to introduce yourselves and maybe tell us what part of the country you're joining from today. We're always excited to have members from coast to coast join us. So I see we've got Ontario, Creston, BC, Winnipeg, Edmonton. I just love seeing that. You know, I hope that makes all of you feel like you're part of a big community, and by being part of this big community together, everyone accomplishes more. And that was our founders' vision, really, was that when small businesses get together and have a voice, their voice will be stronger than as individuals. So lots of people joining us from right across Canada today, which is fantastic. So we've got a lot to cover. So I'm going to start getting right to it here. Oh, one thing I should say is you will get the presentation emailed to you afterwards, so don't worry about that. And I think we'll also post it in the chat if you'd like to get it there, but we will be sending the presentation out afterwards. So don't worry about kind of frantically taking notes or that kind of thing. You will get it, and a copy of the recording. All right, some quotes about hope. So hope from the threshold of the year to come, whispering it will be happier. Let's hope so. And may your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears. And you may face many defeats, but never let yourself be defeated. So we like to start these webinars leaning on a little wisdom from others. And now we are going to get to the agenda. There's a lot going on with federal support programs, so Corinne's going to run you through that. We're going to quickly go through. Most of you are aware of what restrictions apply to your business, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on that, but we do have a summary of where we're at with provincial restrictions, and also some information on what's available with provincial support programs. Of course, right in December, when we were all hoping to have a nice holiday, you know, we had lots of new restrictions coming into play, and some new supports as well. So in case you didn't keep up with all of the news, I can't imagine why that would have been over the holidays. We've got a summary there for you. And then Jocelyn's just going to run you through something that we put together on managing employees through COVID-19. Tons of questions on our helpline about, you know, my staff member has COVID, or his or her partner has COVID. What do we do in that situation? And so we've got a great new template, and you're going to be the very first ones to see it. In fact, I think we're getting them up on the website as I'm speaking right now for all provinces. So she's going to walk you through that, and then we'll get to as many questions as we can. So with that, my pleasure to turn it over to our expert in all things to do with Ottawa, and Corinne, have you walk us through the latest and greatest.
Thanks, Laura. We did touch on some of these last week if you attended last week's webinar, but I think it was important to reiterate some of the things that have become new, but also then we're going to do a quick walkthrough of some of the federal programs that are now available or soon to be available. So as we mentioned last week, but just in case you did missed it, the Canada Emergency Business Accounts and the Regional Recovery Relief Funds have had the repayment deadline extended by 1 year. So they were to be paid back by the end of this year in order to get the forgivable portion. You now have until the end of 2023 in order to pay it back and still get the forgivable portion. So it gives you a little bit more time and still get the forgivable portion, which I think is good news for many businesses who are feeling a little squeezed by the fact that the end of this year was sort of the deadline. We have heard, though, that there are some banks that have converted, some of the institutions, when you got the CFIB loans, provided you with a line of credit. Others gave you a term loan. Those that provided sort of a rolling line of credit, such as Scotia and RBC, as far as we know, have converted those lines of credits now to term loans. And we know that's causing some issues with business owners. So if you're this, for some, it hasn't been hasn't been a big deal, but for others, it has sort of caused some issues. So we're just starting to hear this. So if you have, this is a situation you find yourselves in and there's an issue there, we'd love to hear your feedback on what's going on, because we want to better understand why this happened and whether you were informed. But this is sort of something that's just cropped up in the last week or so that we're trying to get our head around a little bit as to why it happened. So I wanted to share that. So any feedback any of you may have that are in that situation, we'd be happy to take it and then hopefully use it to sort of better understand what happened and why.
And for our members who've been with us for a while, you'll know that getting that repayment on CEBA extended was something that has been on the list. I know, Corinne, you were asking for end of 2024, but end of 2023, and the finance minister, I know, phoned Dan, who's the president of CFIB, personally to tell him this news. And so that is a compliment to all of our members who filled out our surveys and who have been telling us through these webinars that that's important. It's not everything, we know that, but you know, it was on our lobbying priority list, and we'll update you on what our current priorities are there. So big congratulations to everyone on the webinar, and also to you, Corinne, and your team.
Yes, thank you, Laura. It's a good reminder. It was something we lobbied hard for and were able to get. So that's good news there. The other thing I wanted to make you aware of, that back in December, there was an economic statement. There were a couple things in that statement I think that we wanted to make sure you're aware of. The first, this is still proposed, but they did propose to create a small business air quality improvement tax credit. There's some of the details you can see are there. They're basically going to provide a refundable tax credit on air quality expenses, but there'll be a maximum of $10,000 per location. But if you have multiple locations, you can get up to $50,000 in total. And this is only for expenses incurred between September 1st, 2021 and the end of this year, which is a bit unfortunate because I know there are a lot of businesses who may have invested prior to September 1st, and it's something we have questioned the government about. So that's something that we're going to continue to sort of push. It's not yet available. It is something that will likely be part of legislation coming as government returns on Monday here in Ottawa. Parliament will return, likely in some upcoming legislation, but it is something that's coming down the radar. So if it's something you're looking at investing in, there may be some help for you on that front coming soon. The next new issue that had come up, that's on the next slide, is on the highly affected sector credit availability program. This, I'll reiterate, this program has been around now for a little while, probably close to a year now, What's new about it is that they extended the deadline. It was to end at the end of 2021. They have extended it until March 31st, 2022. So that's essentially what we wanted to make sure we're aware of. So if you are interested in getting a loan, or if there's some financing that is needed, they do provide loans up to 1 million if you have a revenue drop of 50% or more. It's a decent interest rate, and you have a repayment term of up to 10 years. Now, there are smaller loan categories too, and the smaller the loan, the less the criteria that are required to get the loan. The higher the loan, the more they're going to require you to provide in terms of to get that loan. But it is mostly based on your pre-pandemic books, not what's happened to you during the pandemic. So if that is something of interest to you, you do have a little bit more time to get it. You do apply as you did with the CEBA loan through your primary financial institution. So those are sort of the newer pieces I wanted to share with you. And if we go to the next slide, I wanted to also talk a little bit about what the federal support programs are right now. So there's been a lot of change happening over the course of the last few months. There was Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, rent subsidy. While those names have disappeared, what they've done is they've renamed them, but now they're a little narrower in scope. It's still sort of the same subsidies, but they've narrowed the scope and called them different things. So we talked a bit about it with CRA last week, but these are the 4 programs. The first is the local lockdown benefit. That is available in one format, but it is the one piece that we're going to talk about more in a minute that's going to be temporarily expanded a little bit. It's not yet been done, as that's coming, but that one is the first one. There's the Tourism and Hospitality Recovery Program, which we talked about a little bit last week, but I'll just run through in case you weren't there. The Hardest Hit Business Recovery Program and the Canada Recovery Hiring Program. The key thing to remember is that while there's 4 programs that could be available for you to access, you only access them one at a time. So essentially, it's one of these 4 that you will benefit from if you're able to get them. And CRA has something called an eligibility tool, and there's going to be a link in the PowerPoint that you hopefully were able to download. And that eligibility tool will help you determine which programs you'll be eligible for, and then we'll provide you the link to the appropriate calculator. So you don't have to go in necessarily knowing exactly which one you're applying for. It will help you a little bit determine which one will provide you with the best outcome when it comes to a subsidy. So I'm just going to walk through each of these very quickly. The first one, which we talked about last week as well, is this local lockdown benefit and the updates they want to make to it. Unfortunately, it's not yet quite available to apply for. It is expected to be available for applications starting sometime early February, we're hearing. That's the latest we've heard. This particular lockdown benefit is in effect from December 19th to February 12th, so that's for 2 periods. What it's going to do, it's going to temporarily expand the access to the lockdown benefit. Normally, the lockdown benefit was only available to you if you were fully shut down by public health order. They expanded to include businesses that were shut down by 50% or more, which happened in many parts of Canada, of course. So that means that those folks have the ability to apply for this. But you also have to show that you have a 25% revenue loss in the current period that you're applying for. So that's the second piece. So you have to be by public health order shut down by at least 50% or more, and you have to show that you have a 25% revenue loss. When you get to that point, you get a 25% subsidy, and then it goes up from there. So if you have 30% revenue loss, you can get a 30% subsidy. Your maximum is at 75% subsidy. So anything higher than a 75% revenue loss will get a 75% subsidy. It operates very similar to the Tourism and Hospitality program, but the difference is it's open to all businesses that are subject to those 2 criteria. If we go to the next slide, and so hopefully that will be available, as I said, by early February if you apply for the December period. The second one is, though, the Tourism and Hospitality Recovery Program. And in order to access this one, you have to be not necessarily in this designated sector, so there's a link there to it, but you have to have at least half of your revenue coming from the types of business activities that are in the designated areas that are listed by CRA. So again, you have a link here of how CRA has defined it. There's a lot of gray in this, and this is where we get a lot of feedback from members about understanding whether they're in or out of this particular program. So if it's not clear to you, please give us a call. We can potentially give you some guidance, or you need to call CRA directly and ask them for some guidance as well. This is sort of one of the downsides that we warned government about, that by trying to define a category of businesses, you're inevitably going to have people on the edges, and it's going to be difficult sometimes to determine who should be in and who should be out. But that's what we're doing as an organization, is keeping a running list of the businesses that at this point look like they're not allowed to take advantage of this particular subsidy, but are still heavily affected because they're somehow associated with the tourism and hospitality sector. So we're keeping that list. We're trying to push it to government to get them to expand the scope a little bit for those that are hard hit. Of course, if you're in those sectors or you do those types of business activities, you then have to have a 40% revenue drop in order to access it in the current period, but not just in the current period. You also have to show you have a 40% revenue drop as an average over the first year of the pandemic, from March 2020 to February 2021. So they have two criteria. You don't have to have the second one for the lockdown benefit, you just need it for the current period, but for this one, you have to show in both periods. Don't ask me why. It just seems unnecessarily complicated, but that is what the rules are at the moment. In order to, once you have that 40% revenue loss, though, you can then get a 40% subsidy, and it then moves up from there based on your revenue loss. This particular program started in October, so some of you may already have applied for it. There's two periods that have already been open, October to November, November to December, and it will run right through until May 7th as well. Again, period 24 is not yet open because that's where the lockdown benefit may come in. That may be the more advantageous one for you once it does open come February. The last two, though, are also available. One is for hardest hit businesses. So this is for any business that doesn't get into the tourism and hospitality program. Similar sort of criteria, except you have to have a 50% revenue loss and show an average of 50% revenue loss for that first 12 months of the pandemic. And then, unfortunately, once you have that 50% revenue loss, you only get a 10% subsidy, but it moves up more quickly as your revenue loss grows until it reaches a subsidy of 50% when you have a 75% revenue loss. So for some reason, it's kind of structured differently, but it is meant for businesses who can't access the other one, but who were hard hit in some form because of the pandemic. The final one is a bit of a different one. It's the Canada Recovery Hiring Program, and it has more to do with helping businesses as they rebuild their businesses and bring people back. And for this one, you have to have experienced only a 10% revenue drop in order to access it. And it's a subsidy that looks at the differences between what your payroll was at from March 14th to April 10th, 2021. They've used that as their baseline, and what it is in the period that you're applying for. So anything higher between that baseline in March to April 21, based and like whatever higher amount you have today, that difference is what you can sort of get back as a subsidy. And so that one too is available, and those are the criteria to get it. So if none of the others work for you, but you have been hiring new staff or increased their payroll, maybe you've increased their wages, you've increased your staff, you've done whatever, then this could potentially still provide some support for you. And that runs from June 6th up until May 7th as well right now. All right. So I wanted to turn it over to Jocelyn, who wanted to sort of give you some tips, I think, in terms of how to manage through this based on the many questions that they get on the business resources team. So of how to deal with these federal support programs. Over to you.
Thank you. So obviously the programs can seem really complicated and really overwhelming. And one of the things that we wanted to give you was just some tips on what you can do to help determine what program you're actually qualified for. So the first thing that we would tell you is to be prepared, bring a little bit of patience, and give yourself quite a bit of time. There are a few people that I've helped through this process to get a better understanding for myself. And, you know, it can take upwards of half an hour to an hour to get some of these numbers ready to go. So the first thing you need when you sit down and to work on these programs is you need to have revenue numbers all the way from March 2019, which is a really long time ago, but you do need to have those numbers, monthly gross revenue numbers from March 2019 all the way up to today. And then if possible, any dates that your business was affected by a public health restriction, including any time specifically that you were locked down. That could be particularly important in the rent one for sure, and also for the lockdown benefit. It sounds like a lot, but there's more. You also may want to have your payroll for all of the active employees going back to March 1st, 2019. Now, if that sounds like a lot, you don't necessarily need to have that before you do the eligibility. I would almost do the eligibility calculator first to figure out what program you qualify for, because if you don't qualify for the wage, you probably don't need the payroll. And it is gross revenues that you need. And gross revenues does not include any government support that you previously received. There was, okay, I think there's some chatter about a typo in the previous slide on when the CRHP went to. The CRHP does go from June 2021 to May 2022. So yes, that was a boo-boo. Sorry about that, guys. We will fix that before we send out the slide deck. Sorry. Okay, so you've got your revenue numbers, you've got your payroll, you know when your business was affected by restrictions. Then you should go to the CRA eligibility calculator. So the good news is you don't need to figure out which program you qualify for. The eligibility calculator will tell you which programs will work best for you. So you don't have to do a lot of homework on what each of the programs are and which one you should apply for. Let this calculator do that for you. The calculator looks simple. It's only a couple questions, but you do need a lot of information to fill in those calculators. And it's okay to help. It's okay to ask for help. If you've taken a look at it and you're stuck, but you have all of your numbers, give us a call. And the link, Irma, is actually right in the slide deck. And I know you probably can't click it while you're watching the webinar, but once you get a copy of the deck, you can use the blue determine your eligibility, click on that, and it will bring you right to the eligibility calculator. Give us a call at BR. If you have all that information in front of you, we're going to be able to walk you through if you get stuck. But you do need to have those numbers in front of you in order for us to help you out. So I hope that covers it. We're there to help you be your support, your breathing buddy, talk you through some of the complications, and we're there to help.
Jocelyn, I think if people are looking for the link also, they can search determine your eligibility on the CRA website, and they will, or determine your eligibility for programs, and that will be probably another easy way to do that. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to say again that I think that for some people, the logical approach here is, okay, well, let me see what I'm eligible for and do all that research before you do anything. And actually the way CRA is seeing this is they're going to help you figure out what you're eligible for. So what you need to have is all of those revenue numbers and what you have in bullet number 1 there. So I think that that's just worth emphasizing, because I think that's been confusing for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Jocelyn. And the typo on the previous slide was my fault, mea culpa. So still haven't quite gotten used to that 2022. So anyway, so yes, it is 2022. So I wanted to just sort of reinforce some of the things. So what we're still pushing for at the federal level, and that where we may still need your help in order to get across the finish line. We know that debt remains a big issue for many of you that you've had to accumulate throughout the pandemic. And one of the ways that we feel that could be helped a little bit is by expanding the CEBA loan to $80,000 and having maybe a larger proportion of forgivable, so say 50%. So that's a big one for us. We're still trying to push government to understand that there probably has to be more done to help businesses with that debt that's been accumulated. We also know that many of you who are newer businesses that started after March 2020 still had zero support from the federal government. The good news is, we'll show you this in a minute, the provincial governments on their supports have mostly included newer businesses, so that's good. But of course, it doesn't go quite as far as some of the federal supports would. So that one continues to be high on our radar as well. We also think that this idea of having all these different programs and different criteria for different sectors or how you do business is just too complicated. And we just wanted to go back to the old scale where we open it up to folks based on their revenue loss only. Because if you're losing money at 20, 25, 30%, that's something that should be sort of thought through a bit better. And so we want to sort of go back to that sliding scale idea and broaden it out a bit more, because we know and have a fairly long list already of businesses that are not going to be able to access some of these programs simply because they're not in the right sector at the moment. So if you agree with any of this, we encourage you to fill out our petition. It's online here, and sort of add your voice to the push that we're making to governments to look at some of these things a bit more closely again. Okay, let's move to the next slide. So right now, provincially, there's lots of things happening. We're not going to go through all of these. It's just to give you a sense that essentially almost every province, with the exception of one, has imposed some kind of restrictions on certain businesses right across the country. The only province that hasn't is Saskatchewan. As you can see here from Western Canada and Ontario, mostly at 50% capacity type, some a little bit more, some a little bit less. If we go to the next slide, you'll see also Quebec is in a similar place, and Atlantic, probably the most shut down right now is New Brunswick. They have pretty much closed everything. So I know it's tough for many of our members in that province right now, but I know it's tough for many right across the country. So that's sort of the state of where we're at. We do know that some of these restrictions are going to start getting lifted across various jurisdictions over the course of the next week or two. So that, I think, will be good news for many of you that are hoping to get a bit more business back in the door. So hopefully that can happen as soon as possible where it can happen. So just wanted to give you that sense of how broad range this current sort of shutdowns have been right across Canada. Also, many provinces, thankfully this time, after much pressure from CFIB, have provided some of their own supports. These are just examples, and those are links to the various more information about these supports in every province. So pretty much BC, Alberta, Manitoba, a couple in Ontario as well, as you can see on this slide as well. The only provinces that don't are actually Saskatchewan again, because they had no restrictions, and Newfoundland and Labrador. So they're the only province that has some restrictions that has not yet offered any kind of support. They have said they might, but so far they have not come up with anything. So some of these provinces have a little bit more than even what we have listed here, but these were the main ones we thought would be of greatest interest to you. So we had included some of them. I think there's one more slide if you go to the next page, which includes Prince Edward Island and New Brunswick, the second one. So that'll be helpful for you if you're interested in looking at what those are. Those links take you straight to either the information of it or the actual application form for it. Some of them have not yet been opened, but are going to be opening within the next few days. Some are currently open. And the other thing to watch for is some of them have fairly quick deadlines. Some of them actually have to apply by end of February or March in order to access it. So it's if you're interested in these, you need to get on them fairly quickly.
So great information on these slides, and I just want to remind everyone we will be, because some joined a little bit later, we will be sending out the deck and the recording to everyone through your email, so you will get it. Arish has also posted it in the chat, and maybe we can post it again just so that people, if we're running through some of this fairly quickly. Yeah, Arish just shared it again in the chat. And what I think is great about this information is giving you those deadlines and whether or not it's open, because sometimes you're hearing about these programs and then you look for them and then you realize it's not yet open for application, because governments are making the announcements before they're actually putting stuff, making the applications available. Corinne, while we're talking about, well, one thing I wanted to mention that you and I were chatting about yesterday is that newer businesses often haven't had a lot of help. And at the provincial level, some of these programs do include newer businesses. So if you're a business that opened after March 2020, you may want to check that, may want to check out your provincial support and see if there's any help available there. So That's one thing I definitely wanted to mention. The other thing is the most upvoted question, until I clicked on, we'll answer it live, is coming from Sandra, and I feel like this is the right place to talk about it, where we're talking about provincial restrictions and supports. Is, can you comment on the recent position statements from Dan Kelly asking the governments for the removal of all COVID mandates and restrictions? And so I just wanted to make a comment about some of the survey results that we get, and you may want to add some color commentary here as well. But we have we take our direction from you, from our members. So that's why we survey you, because we do that. I will say that through the pandemic, and Corinne and I have talked about this a lot offline, is that it's been more challenging, because typically we get pretty strong majorities on things. You know, not many businesses liked, for example, the new tax proposals for small business a couple of years ago that we fought, it was pretty clear majority. But when it comes to restrictions and vaccine mandates and all of that, it's not just society that is split on a lot of those things, but our membership is split on a lot of those things. So we've been surveying, and also it's very fluid. The temperature has changed quite a bit through the pandemic. But just last week, we did a survey of you, and we asked the question about what are businesses' views on current lockdowns and restrictions, and do you think they should be strengthened, they're about right, or they should be, restrictions should be eased? And so not many of you thought they should be strengthened, about 8%. There's about 20% that thought they're about right, and 53% said no, they should be eased. So that's partly guiding our thinking. But we did have a news release out that I think has been a bit misrepresented in some by some around the vaccine mandate, specifically for truckers who have been exempt from this because they're bringing often essential products across the border. And we also know that within our membership, one of your top concerns right now is supply chain challenges. So we did put out a release where we were, along with most other business associations, challenging the idea that this late in the game, we would put that kind of restriction on. There may be some other better ways to do that if we're worried about truck drivers spreading COVID, that, you know, there could be rapid testing and everything, but just from a very practical, pragmatic, not ideological point of view, but just from a pragmatic point of view, the idea of making supply chain challenges worse just wasn't sitting well with us, and we know with many of you. Corinne, you might want to add to that, but I did want to clarify, because we have been getting some questions on our helpline about that as well.
Yeah, no, I think you've articulated extremely well. I think what was clear about what we were trying to get out yesterday was simply that piece of it. We're not here to say, you know, and I think some people get it mixed up with the other controversial thing happening right now, which of course is the convoy. We were not there to say whether we were for or against that. We were here just to say this is going to have an impact, and it's going to have a big impact. We've heard from trucking members who say that, you know, it's 10 to 15% of their truckers are in this category, and therefore it's going to be very challenging for them, in an already challenging kind of business, to be able to get all the goods that they need to get into Canada, and that can have obviously repercussions. And our surveys are very clear right now. It's rising prices and supply chain challenges, the cost of doing business, that are having the biggest impact and challenges on businesses. So we just wanted to sort of point out the fact that this is only going to exacerbate a situation that's already been very challenging. So again, it's you know, it's a fine line for us, because it is a mix of members, and there's not a clear direction either way. And I don't think Dan Kelly in his remarks is trying to be like super saying in one direction or the other. It's just that sometimes what he says gets interpreted by the media to be one direction or the other, but he is very conscious of also sticking to what our members are telling us, and that is something that's core to who we are and how we operate. So we'll continue to do that and be transparent about the information we receive, and that's what we put out toward the media as well. So.
Yeah, and trying to represent your views as best we can when there's actually a fairly wide divergence within, even in the chat, where we are seeing some of this. Last thing I'll say on this is I did just email Dan while I was off camera on this, just to see if there's anything he wanted to say, and he said he also wanted to clarify that he hasn't pushed to remove all COVID measures. He said that at some point we either need to, scrap all COVID measures to allow business to operate as normal, or continue to provide full financial supports until they can be removed. So it was partly a way of just saying, look, it's not fair to have the restrictions. And I know Dan has said this many times, it's not fair to have these, all of these restrictions without the financial supports, to tell people that they can't operate as normal without the financial support. But it's tricky, and we all have different views. And I think the important thing is that we continue to have the conversation. What I love about working for this organization is I feel that small businesses do an awesome job of representing the sort of the pragmatic, sensible middle. And within that, we're going to have some disagreement, but I love that we continue to have the conversations. With that, why don't we, Jocelyn's got one more thing that she wants to cover, and then we'll take more of your questions. And Sandra, I hope that answers and clarifies for you our position, and for the others who had upvoted that question.
Thank you, Laura. So we're actually very, very excited because you guys are actually the very first group of members to see this tool. In fact, if you were to click on this link right now, it's so new that it might not actually be live published. You might see just Atlantic because we finished a day earlier, but by the end of the webinar, all of the provinces will be live. So this is a tool that we've created called the COVID-19 in the Workplace Quick Reference for Employers. And we're going to open one up, and we're going to take a look at it a little bit closer because this picture is ridiculously small. So just one moment. And Alexa in the background wants to choose one. Okay, so we're looking at Nova Scotia. So what these are one-pagers by province that gives you a flow chart of what to do for your employee in different scenarios having to do with COVID. So for example, if your employee is a close contact of a positive case within their household, what do you need to do if the employee is vaccinated, which is pink here, or if the employee is not vaccinated, which is gray. So in Nova Scotia, for example, if someone is a close contact in a household, you must get a test within 72 hours after the exposure. If they have no symptoms, they are to stay at home, except of course to go to work. And then there's the isolation requirement. So it kind of deals with testing, isolation, and then what needs to happen to go back to work. So we want to scroll down a little bit, Alexa. So there's close contact, there's close contact outside of the household, which would be considered co-workers. And then there's my employee has symptoms, what do I do? Or my employee has tested positive. So the good thing is that unfortunately, most provinces do have different reasonings for those that are vaccinated, those that are not vaccinated. And these charts are really handy. And Chris wants to know if we can get these charts done. Yes, they are done. They're done for every province, and they are going to be available in the link that's provided right in the slide deck. And we can actually put the link in the chat as well. But as I said, this is so new that all of the provinces may not be published online. Oh, well, actually, Alexa, they're all there. So it looks like that is the power of team.
Yeah, that is the power of team. And Jocelyn, I know you and your team were up late last night to make this happen when we said, can we get this for the webinar? Because we think this would be really useful for everybody, and we need to get this out fast. And so you're getting some love in the chat function, I can see, for doing that. So please pass that along to the team that was up a little bit later than normal last night. All of you should know that, I mean, Corinne and I and Jocelyn and others are sort of the face here, but there is a team behind us, and they're very dedicated, and they're really they're really mission oriented, and the mission of supporting small business is a very powerful and compelling one. So anyway, we're glad to hear getting the feedback that this is a that this is going to be a good tool for you. That's what we thought, and it is literally hot off the presses. So
I did see someone mention Manitoba's not there. Manitoba was the last one completed. And somebody might have said Ontario's not there, but they will be really shortly. And as you mentioned, I want to say thank you to actually Sean, Alicia, and Caesar, who are answering questions in the background. I know that you mentioned we have some team members in the back, but I can see they're doing an amazing job at handling those questions.
Yeah, one of the things that the business resources team works really hard on is to try to make these, as you can appreciate, sometimes the hardest thing to do is make things simple. And just to show you a little bit of the behind the curtain stuff, I mean, the slides that we had to try to cover this material before these templates, it was a little rough going, wasn't it, John? It was like slogging through a lot of material, whereas these templates just make it easy. So thanks. And again, these are practical tools. This isn't a comment from us on, it's just that provinces are treating vaxxed and unvaxxed differently in some cases in terms of what the requirements are. So, and call us if you have any questions. Jocelyn, was there anything else you wanted to say about this, or I might keep you up on the screen to answer some questions with Corinne and get Corinne to come back, because I think we are at that fun part in the webinar where we get to answer as many of your questions live as we can. And I know we've got a few that have been upvoted. So Corinne can come back on, and I was going to go, Corinne, to the question that has the most votes that I can see from Jason first, which is, are we going to see any tax breaks in the near future for the insane losses a significant amount of us have incurred? And you know, extending the timeline is one thing, and I know we've said that too, that that's not the magic bullet on the repayment. And he's also commenting that, like many of our members, he's had to inject personal savings in order to not lose the business on many occasions. So I know you're lobbying hard for this, Corinne, and but anything you want to comment there?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we're very consumed with right now is the amount of debt people have accumulated. So I think that sort of fits with what you're talking about, Jason, that you've had to now, you know, take on debt or take out personal savings in order to deal with the debt. So we're looking at it in different ways. Certainly tax breaks are part of it, or tax credits, definitely. The government hasn't signaled yet that they're going to go there, but it is something that's on our radar. Budgets are coming, so the federal budget will likely be in March or April. And we're just about to launch our pre-budget submission, which includes a whole bunch of things, such as tax credits in certain areas that may help alleviate some of those costs. But also, as I said earlier, finding, you know, maybe expanding the forgivable portion of the CEBA loan, or reopening it up and making it bigger, and making much bigger amounts of it forgivable, so that can help deal with some of the debt that you've accumulated. So that's how we're focusing our efforts. So we're hoping to see maybe a combination of the two. But it's, you know, I don't know whether the government's going to go there on this. You know, I think they've been a little bit more open to some feedback given the latest rounds of restrictions. But I also think they're focused on trying to sort of move back to a more normal pace. But I think what we have to do is make it clear to them that it's still a very challenging time for many businesses out there, and so that assistance will continue to be needed, and maybe tax credits or other breaks there is the way to go about it in the future. So that's definitely something we're going to do a lot for. And
this one from Jackie is for both of you, actually, because Jocelyn, you may have some tips here too. But they paid off the $40,000 at RBC, still shows $20,000 owing. Asked several times when this will be cleared from my profile. They don't give answers. So I think that's a specific question, but the more general topic is you're having some challenge getting information from your banks around the CEBA loan and paying it off, and getting questions answered. Any advice on that from either of you?
Well, CEBA has become, you know, it's interesting. CEBA closed back in June of 2021, yet it continues to be one of, I think, the highest number of questions that we get, right, Jocelyn, when it comes to these programs. I mean, obviously the best solution, and I'll let Jocelyn pipe in on this as well, but is to talk to the bank. I mean, obviously the bank at the end of the day is the one that holds the loan, and they're the ones that you're going to have to sort of interact with. If that's not working for you, certainly you can try giving us a call and we can sort of figure out what's going on and why you're not getting the answers that you should be getting from your bank. Like, as you may know, there's the agency that oversaw CFIB was Export Development Canada. We do have some contacts there, but even the team there is a sort of fraction of what it once was. So it's been a bit challenging to sometimes get answers. But that's definitely, I think, something that we're still taking the questions. We're still trying to help members through that process. So certainly, if you're running into roadblocks and that you're not getting anywhere with your bank directly, then yeah, I would suggest you give us a call. Jocelyn, do you have anything? Yeah.
And Rachel is the expert on this. Unfortunately, she's not here, but I think Royal Bank was the bank that did a lot of their loans as revolving loans.
They did. Yeah.
And then they flipped them into term loans. So it could be a Royal Bank specific issue that you're having. So again, I think that it would have to go back to the bank. But if you're being stonewalled at the bank, by all means, give us a call. We'll help the best that we can.
Yeah, and I'll say the other bank we know that's doing this is Scotiabank. And I did note somebody from the Bank of Montreal said it's also happening to them. So it's happening in a few of the banks. So any other information you can provide to us, because we've been thinking about sending letters to the banks as well about why is this happening? What sort of information are you providing? And I believe, I can't remember the name of the member on the chat that talked about the Bank of Montreal situation. When she tried to get some answers, I think they weren't able to give her any answers at the bank. So obviously, this is something that's occurred very recently, and so we're trying to get to the bottom of it ourselves. So if it has an impact on you, then please let us know how it has an impact and what information has been provided. So this is one that's sort of right on it's just coming onto our radar, and so we're still sort of exploring what's going on and why it's happened.
And Jocelyn, I see that you were typing an answer to Bill's question, and it has 7 upvotes, so I'm going to put it live. The Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit, does the employer have to issue an ROE to an employee who is off work to isolate or recover from COVID? Is it up to the employee to apply for this benefit? And so just any advice on that one? Did Jocelyn?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. You're okay. Frozen.
All right.
There we go.
Not sure why I'm frozen.
There you go. You're not frozen anymore.
So the employees are responsible to apply for their own benefits. And your requirement to issue an ROE as an employer is if there's an interruption of earnings. So an interruption of earnings, by definition, is if there's 7 consecutive days without work, or if the employee has dropped below 60% of their hours. So if they're off work and they're going to be off for a week or at least a week, you could go ahead and issue the ROE. I don't believe that the ROE is a requirement to start the process of applying for the CRSB, but it's almost like they're 2 separate requirements. You have an obligation to Service Canada because there is an interruption of earnings, but they have to apply on their own.
Okay, thank you. Corinne, there are a number coming up on rents, property taxes, that kind of thing. And so we're starting to hear more about that as people are really concerned about anything that affects costs. I wonder, I'm just going to say that property tax has been an issue that we've been on for a long time with municipal government. So we do reports where we look at municipal spending, and that the spending is often far outpacing what population growth and inflation would suggest is reasonable. We have done reports showing that property taxes, often businesses pay 3 to 5 times more than equivalently valued residential properties. So it has been an issue we've been on. This is one one that it is tough slogging. I will say the municipal level of government is a tough one, but I think we may have a new window to make some progress on this issue. There's no quick fix to this one though. So for all of you who are worried about it, thank you for sharing your concerns, because this helps get it higher on our list of things that we're lobbying for. But unfortunately, there's just no quick fixes other than keep telling your stories, because those stories are compelling.
And I will say, if they're looking for some help with their property taxes, there are some provinces that are doing things in this area, others are not. So in Ontario, there is going to be a bit of a property tax rebate for those who have been shut down. Don't know how extensive it is, but you can check it out. It's part of the list of business supports on the provincial side that I provided for those of you in Ontario. They have offered to cover a little bit, I think, of the energy and property tax costs. And then there are certain cities across the country that have done a little bit in this area. So it really does depend. And whether it's enough or go far enough, probably not. But I think that there is some of that is happening in some places in the country.
Yeah. Were there any, Jocelyn, even in the answered, I see we've answered 54 questions, anything that you wanted to raise that was coming up a lot, or Corinne, anything you wanted to raise?
Prior to the webinar, there were some questions that were submitted, and there was a question, and I kind of see a bit of a theme about the sick days. And there's a question of when, if there is sick days, either provincial or otherwise, when do you use those versus when would you ask somebody to use CRSB, which is the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit. And the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit is specific to COVID. And if your employee has missed at least 50% of a work week, they can get the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit for 1 week chunks at a time. So if an employer provides paid sick leave, I guess the big difference in that situation is, one, if it's COVID, you could use the government support. If it's not COVID, obviously use paid sick leave. The only other difference of consideration would be the amount of money that the employee gets. The Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit is net $450 a week. So let's say you have a fully paid employee sick leave or short-term disability. The only consideration of whether or not to use that or go to the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit would be the amount that's actually going out to the employee. So it's a little bit of either or, and it depends on the situation, but we're happy to talk that out if you would like to do that.
Great, thanks, Jocelyn. Anything else from from those questions that came in advance that you want to, or maybe while you're looking at that, I'll put one to Corinne on the federal government has shut down the summer student support program for employers without taking into consideration that many businesses are in a lockdown and the challenge in meeting their January 25th deadline. We were just talking about that the other day because that was featured on our website, and so we were looking at taking that down. So it's an interesting comment, and a couple of other businesses have upvoted that maybe something we could take to the feds. Yes,
and it's something we had also sort of thought about last week. Was we saw the deadline approaching and thinking how that's going to be difficult for many. We fought this last year too. We pushed last year for an extension because we were in a similar situation, unfortunately, last year. And they agreed to extend it by like 5 days. So it wasn't a big extension. But hopefully maybe it helped a few businesses out last year. It's definitely something we're going to raise with government as an important piece. I'm curious about how many applications they got from small businesses in particular. That would be, I think, one of the questions we're going to have to ask them. But yeah, it's something that we also had thought through, that it seems to come fast at a time that's not very ideal for a lot of businesses that would use the program. So thank you for raising it again. It's something we will certainly bring up.
And Beth has a comment that I just want to reinforce with everyone, that we're hearing a lot of this, I mean, in her case, she's hasn't experienced a big loss, which unfortunately many businesses have, but and has had to raise prices due to rising costs, but still making less profit. And we're hearing an awful lot of that you know, the rising costs and some of the supply chain disruptions and challenges are really making it tougher, even with the supports or the same business that you might have had in 2019. So just that for you and those others that are experiencing that, we're hearing a lot of that. We know that's an issue, and we are certainly providing that feedback to governments.
I wanted to mention there's been, I think, a couple of comments too about when we talked about the main federal support programs and having to show your revenue drop in the current period. A couple of people have probably rightly corrected me in that it can be the current period or the previous period. So that's just a small sort of nuance. Yes, that what they had a weird name for it early on in the pandemic. But it is still, that particular piece of it is still, I think, available, that you either have to show a 40% revenue loss in the current period or the previous period in order to be eligible for the Tourism and Hospitality Recovery Program and the Hardest Hit Sector Business Program. But you also have to have that 12-month average from 2020 as well. Yeah. So I just wanted to clarify that.
I wanted to bring up something that actually Julie Lynn asked before the webinar, and Christine kind of made mention to it during the webinar, is about the actual Canada worker lockdown benefit. And the question about that is there any support available for if staff hours are reduced but completely shut down? And I think it's important, even though it says it's the worker lockdown benefit, you don't have to be closed to qualify for that. It's actually triggered if an employee has lost more than 50% of their regular working hours due to COVID. So that's the Canada worker lockdown benefit. And then EI, regular EI, actually gets triggered if an employee's salary falls below 60% of the regular weekly earnings. So if you are required to reduce hours, but not completely lay off your staff, there could be some support for them during that time.
Great. Well, I know there's still, we've answered an awful lot of questions, but there's always more. And I know some are still in the background trying to answer some of these questions for you, but keep an eye out on our website. We use the questions, and also we're always looking at your feedback in terms of what would be useful tools and what. In fact, it was all the questions we were getting on what to do if my employee's sick or someone in their household is sick, and what do we need to do, that led to those great templates that Jocelyn put up earlier. So we're trying to be very responsive to your needs. So please keep them coming, because that is very helpful for us. I'm going to wrap us up on time. I often skate over a little bit, but I'm going to try and wrap us up on time. And so, as usual, I'll ask Jocelyn and then Corinne, and then I'll bring us home with just a few final thoughts and comments as we are getting closer to the end of January 2022 and almost at that 2-year mark. 60-second webinar. Jocelyn, any thoughts from you and your team that you want to share with everyone?
Again, you guys, I still think that our members are heroes, and we really love working with you. It's been really challenging for everyone, and we're still there taking questions. We took 78,000 last year. We'll take 80, 90,000 more this year. We're happy to do it. Thank you for continuing to reach out to us and sharing your stories. We will continue to stay up to date and provide you with as much information as we possibly can. And we love when you guys come to the webinars, because we get that little bit of one-on-one interaction with you. So thank you very much.
Great. And Corinne?
Thank you again for joining us. Hopefully these continue to be of interest and are helpful. That's ultimately what we want these particular webinars to achieve, is to provide you with some answers that you may be having difficulty finding elsewhere. And we actually read every one of the questions, even if we don't answer them all. And so please know that helps us inform us on what the issues are, what information we may need to include on our websites and in other sort of materials that we create for our members. And of course, it helps inform the work that I do with my teams and our legislative teams right across the country as we go and talk to government. Parliament does resume here on Monday. They've been on a long break since before the holidays. And so I suspect it's going to become an interesting time over the course of the next several weeks. So I'm sure we'll have a lot more to share. I just want to continue, as I always do, to encourage you to fill out those surveys. Absolutely key. I was again just talking to a staffer in the finance minister's office a few days ago and talked again about the importance of our research, even asked if we could ask some questions that could help them understand how they can improve in certain areas. So it does get used, and it gets used in ways that are very hopefully constructive and helpful as well at the end of the day for you as business owners that fill out those surveys. So if you get them and you have the time, we'd really appreciate it if you could do that. So with that, thank you very much.
Great. And I'll just say a few comments and then we'll wrap up. I just want to echo my colleagues in that you are amazing, and we are inspired to work for you and with you to help support through the pandemic. One of the things that I think has been fantastic about these webinars is it's created a community. And I think back sometimes to the early webinars when Corinne and I didn't even have our camera on. We just had, and then at one point we were like, oh, they might want to see us. Maybe we should put our cameras on. We're learning and adjusting and pivoting, just as many of you are with your businesses in terms of how to better serve our clients, and our clients are you. And we just appreciate your support and all of your comments, all of the kind words. Keep us and our teams going, and we'll pass them along to all of the many people who are behind us to make these webinars a success. I should say we're likely not to, we probably won't have enough new to report to have one next week, but we're looking at one following week. We're not as scheduled as we were in the early pandemic, where it was weekly, because there was so much new information coming out. We want to make sure there's new information and there's enough value for you in these webinars. So probably week after next, but could be depending on what's going on. If there's a lot going on, obviously we'll put one on. So just stay tuned. And of course, this will be sent out to you. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call us. The phone number is there. We always love hearing from you. So with that, have a great week. Remember, hope is the inspiration this week, brighter days ahead, and hope for that. And we will talk to you all soon. With that, I will end the webinar.